Well, I'll kick it off here. I've got some slides today, and we'll just get going. Thank you, Carol Ann and group, for asking me to speak today, and I consider it an honor to be here today. So I am Jerry Smith. I am the broadband manager, a new position for the county, and it is an exciting time to be in broadband. And I thought I would just have a slides here and do a little bit of introduction. Carol Ann shared some information in social media, I think, some things about who I am, how I got here in my role, but I'll go ahead and cover that. And then you can see the plan. The rest of the plan for the hour is to get through some of these topics. And, it is an interesting time for broadband, and obviously you're interested in this topic. But I'm going to sort of assume that you know a little bit about it, but I'm going to talk about things that are fairly basic, and to try to build a base of understanding, and then go from there. And I certainly welcome questions, and as said, feel free to interrupt. And I'm not going to be monitoring comments or chats or questions, but my Carol Ann and crew will help me do that. So I am have a background in IT, and but before that, I forgot. I was going to say, how did I get to New Mexico? If you hear an accent, it's a little bit of a Southern Texas accent. But as soon as I discovered New Mexico in college, I fell in love with it. And I like to chuckle and tell the story of a college suite mate saying, hey, New Mexico, I worked at a camp and the bears would chase you off into the lake. And I said, oh my, but oh, you bet, I gotta go do this. So I started coming in the summers during college and fell in love with New Mexico, as a lot of folks do. I do have a background in IT, having been an IT director at a public school for 15 years. And before that, I was actually supporting schools and supporting other institutions in IT as the internet was getting invented. My career would change along the way. And infrastructure is a fairly recent addition to my career. I worked for a nonprofit in New Mexico for 4 years, and then transitioned to the state of New Mexico for another 4 years. And both of those jobs were dealing with infrastructure, and infrastructure in this case means building out networks, either on the premises or trying to connect to networks or the internet. The K-12 world is a world that I'm pretty familiar with, having been IT director in a public school and putting together the dial-up modems forward to networks. And so IT is a background, but I was glad to get back in the K-12 world. When I started working for the state of New Mexico, I worked for an agency called Public School Facilities Authority. And they were an agency created that to help schools have adequate facilities across the state. And 6 years ago or so, they realized broadband was a part of that. And so I joined that department of 4 people, and we were working and mentoring with IT directors across the state, trying to take full advantage of federal funding and building out networks and building fiber. That program worked with a federal program and some state funding, to where we basically did like 500 miles of fiber across the state, connecting school buildings and then connecting schools. Part of that was Albuquerque Public Schools was a super large project. And in those projects too, we worked with ReadyNet, which is an organization that's a regional network that's here locally that does a lot of local work. So what is broadband? I thought I'd just start with fiber, because that's a lot of what broadband operates on top of. And whether it makes it all the way to your house or not, there is fiber somewhere along the way to get to internet. Just a general comment is that fiber is a good long-term investment. It last I heard from a webinar that I participated in lately, is they really don't know how long fiber will last because it's been installed and we're still waiting to see when the end of life is. But 20 to 40 years is what a lot of folks are saying, certainly 20. And then you can stretch that in. The beauty of fiber is that you just change out the electronics on the end and you're able to extend the life of it more so. Fiber infrastructure, I'm just jumping right in that there are two ways to do fiber. You can go aerial or buried, and aerial just means using poles, typically electric poles or phone company poles. And a lot of times when you do projects, those poles are not in great shape. So you have to do what's called make ready. And that's a cost that sometimes is a hidden cost, especially when schools would get proposals from companies. They hadn't necessarily done all their homework and they find out that, oh, we've got to replace a bunch of poles. So a better way of going, if you can go there, is to bury the fiber. And burying fiber, you can do it two ways. You can go inside a conduit in the ground, or do direct bury, meaning you have a special kind of fiber optic cable that you don't have to have a conduit. It doesn't have to be inside of a conduit. It can be direct buried. Only problem is the gophers like it too. So sometimes you get some cable chewed into. So every which way, it's kind of complicated, especially when you start considering you need to work with other entities to allow passage through their property. You have to do permits, and right away is a typical way to go. I've just listed out there some of the organizations that you get to have fun with to try to work things out as you try to get the project done: the Forest Service, BLM, National Parks, Tribal, State, Department of Transportation, the county, city, private landowners, electric company, phone company. And that's even before you get to the technical part of it. So in reality, these projects that try to get done, the technical is really not that major part of the process. It's really getting things, all your ducks in a row, and permits, and allowing you to go through. Another major part can be environmental impact or archaeological impact. And a lot of times you have to hire consultants. That's actually the smart way to do it, because you should just assume you're going to get flat red flags as you start to get the permits to say you need to do an environmental impact study, an archaeological impact study. And those are often what slow down projects and also increase costs that gets passed on. But what is broadband for Los Alamos County? For us, just general topics here. Download and upload speeds are one of the first things that you talk about. Trying to do a Zoom meeting like today, if you don't have good upload speed, you have to turn off your video, and hopefully you can keep your audio going. The goal is to have what's called symmetrical speeds, where your download speed and your upload speeds are the same. And that is what federal funding that's available now is pointing towards, is to try to get to symmetrical speeds. Most of us don't have that. A lot of times, like the link that I'm on from the county, they do have symmetrical speeds, and businesses try to have symmetrical as opposed to asymmetrical, where your speeds are not the same. There are business reasons that companies do the lower upload speeds, and those are having to be addressed. And what is adequate broadband? What is adequate internet service? Definitions definitely are changing as we move forward in what we expect from our connections. And the latest USDA grant, it actually says 100 up and 100 down is the requirement. Whenever their projects get approved, the provider that's getting the money has to guarantee that they'll have the 100 up and the 100 down, and that just to make a point, that is considered symmetrical. Another point that we should all be thinking about is, we want any funds that we spend to be future-proofed and good for a long time. So that is definitely a consideration of what broadband improvements would represent in the county. So I thought I'd go over technologies. Again, this is just sort of establishing a base to know that we all understand that it's not just about fiber. Some of us today may still be using copper to connect to the internet over DSL. And DSL is an old technology. It was a great technology when the internet first came out because it would take advantage of the phone lines that were already in every house. But depending on how far away you are from the phone company's electronic equipment, your speeds are really, really almost as bad as dial-up speeds. The next technology that is also older is cable TV. It is over coax, which is just a combination of copper and steel, but it is a different technology than the phone company has. And those two are to be compared with fiber to the home, or the FTTH acronym that you might see. Of course, we need to talk about satellite. If you're really desperate, you go with the traditional satellite, which are the satellites that are way up in the sky. DirecTV, Dish, those are type services that work off satellites that are miles and miles away from us. Viasat and Hughes. There is, and some of those offer internet over that, but there are, if you've ever experienced it, you know what I'm talking about, that it's not a great solution. The new satellite technology that's available is low Earth orbit, or LEO. And that's the term describing the SpaceX Starlink that Elon Musk and company are moving forward with. And their target audience, though, isn't necessarily communities. It's more of a remote, rural locations that are so far out that they would never get fiber, because SpaceX is not pretending that they are able to do like a lot high speed to a lot of people in a small area. Example is like ranches all across New Mexico. So there's a great fit for Starlink. I've actually just ordered it for my mom, who's in a challenging location in Texas. So technology discussion wouldn't be complete without talking about wireless. You got two kinds of wireless there. Mobile phones, which is what we all have, or most of us have. And what we hear about in that wireless world now is 5G and how it's going to solve all our problems. But in reality, it's complicated. There's really three tiers of 5G. And like right now, I'll see, actually, let's see. Yeah, I don't see 5G, but sometimes even in Los Alamos, I'll see 5G on my phone. But the reality is it's not really anything different than what you had before. They just put a new label on it, and it's using the existing towers and the existing speeds that would be considered low band. And then the next tier up is mid band. And then the higher one is called high band. There's some other terms, but basically, if you think about those three tiers, the mid band is using a different frequency. It doesn't go as far as the signal on the current towers, but the low band will always stay low speed. So the 5G that you get today is not going to change unless the wireless companies decide to take that next jump to go to mid band. And then you also heard about super high speed or ultra wideband. That's what we all would like to get, but it's in reality not going to happen because it doesn't even go through windows and walls. So you have to be like sitting in a stadium where there's a lot of people, and the wireless equipment is sitting right in that same space. So it's any expectations that you have around 5G should definitely be tempered. It is a complementary service, but it doesn't look like it's going to be that great of a solution going forward. Things could change, you never know, but the technologies that are currently available do have their limitations. There is the benefit of working with the wireless providers as a county to try to help move that forward and create more towers that are in the neighborhoods, to where this mid-band solution, which gives a pretty good speed of like 100 meg, could be available. But wireless companies are not just by default going to invest in that unless the community is pushing. And one of my goals is to try to help coordinate that effort going forward. Another kind of wireless is what's called fixed wireless, where you have towers that can communicate to proprietary equipment that you put in your home, and the fixed tower is connected back to fiber. So that is a solution in some areas. I know down the Espanola Valley, there's quite a bit of fixed wireless towers being available because fiber isn't making it out to individual homes. But the reality is that both these wireless type solutions and all the other solutions, even the DSL and the TV coax cable service, they all require fiber. So it's just a matter of how close fiber gets to you. That last mile, so to speak, is what is left to not be fiber. So the terminology there, that last line on the slide, is what is backhaul. And backhaul just means fiber that gets you back to the internet off of a wireless tower, or off of your DSL, or even off of the SpaceX Starlink. It will require fiber to get to the internet back and forth. So I touched on last mile and middle mile, and those are terminologies that need to be explained, but they're really pretty simple, and they are something that we'll use going forward a lot, because a lot of my work is divided into these two categories. And last mile for Los Alamos is it means the internet feed, or actually, I have this backwards. I'm just now noticing my slide is backwards. I apologize for that. So middle mile for Los Alamos means it's the internet feed and fiber optic line going off the hill. And last mile is everything else besides middle mile. It's the part of the internet that's located here on the hill in our communities. So I apologize for the error. Last mile means the last portion that goes to your house, is how you should think of that. Whereas the middle mile is what's in the middle between you and the rest of the internet. So this is a slide with a lot of words. It was a part of a presentation that I listened to earlier this week, and I thought it was useful. If you're able to see that, you kind of get an idea of what I was saying with middle mile, last mile, and then you see that middle mile being there in the middle connects back to the core internet backbone. And that's the part of the internet where all the traffic of all of us is coming together. We don't have anything to do with the core internet backbone, but we do care about what the middle mile and can influence what the middle mile is and the last mile is. You'll see there on the bottom of the screen, it's talking about some federal funding that is just coming available. It's been approved, and it's just taking a while for the rules to be made over how to award that to states. But it is 42 billion that will be distributed nationally. And I've got some further notes about that further in the presentation. The technologies slides that I had, this is kind of a graphical explanation of it. If you want to think of it like a highway, the highway system, highlighted in yellow is the interstate highways or the core internet. Think of the middle mile as being like a state highway, and then it connects to the city streets, and the city streets is the last mile that Los Alamos is concerned about. One more slide. This is also a slide that I thought was helpful. It is outlining in a table here everything that I just talked about. On the left is fiber, and there's 3 categories. You'll see speed talked about. Latency is a technical term, but it means how long does it take for for your data or your request when you type in a website. How long does it take for that to get back and forth? And sometimes there's a lot of slowness, even though you have high speed. If you have low latency, I talked about the satellites. The satellites that are way far out, they have a lot of latency because they're so far away, and the signal has to travel so far to get back and forth. You end up not being able to do certain things. You'll see that's on the far right. That's the GEO satellite. So, and also on the reliability category, you'll see that there are some of these technologies that have advantages over the others. This is a helpful slide. It divides things into terrestrial. That just means it's wired, it's on the earth, and wireless is all those different categories that I talked about. There's another one in there, TV white space, that is kind of another way to do things. It is kind of a limited application. So the problems, talking about broadband a little bit, hopefully now we can talk about the problems and they'll make a little more sense. Middle mile and last mile. Middle mile for Los Alamos and White Rock, we only have one internet feed off the hill, so to speak, and that is not the best scenario for communities. Typically, communities have choices and ways to be have fault tolerance built in for your internet feed. This causes 2 problems. The resiliency, redundancy words just mean if something happens to that one feed, like if it gets cut or if the system is down, then all your wireless phone goes down, LAN goes down, county goes down, the schools goes down. So it's a major issue for this community, and it has been a topic that's been worked on for a while. But now that I'm on board, I'm going to pick it up and work on it as well. The other part of the problem is competition, and that means that if there's only one provider, the pricing is not as attractive, and you end up also, sometimes you're just told no, that certain things aren't available. And attitudes with cooperation also aren't the best. There below, the third item I want to point out is there's also consensus that this current single feed has its limitations, and so it ends up as being a bottleneck at this point. Even though it is fiber optic, there are limitations to what the company can do over that without spending a lot more money, as only so much internet traffic can travel up and down the one single link. So addressing that, trying to get a second feed off the hill is my focus for this middle mile category. Similarly, and related to middle mile is last mile, there are 2 main internet providers. They're national companies, and you guys know who they are. And the problem with that is that Los Alamos is the community is a small fish in their big pond, and so this location is not the first to get an investment made, and I know of no investments that are planned. For example, what we would like is that they would come in and get fiber to the homes or get fiber closer to the homes and improve their infrastructure. And I'm not aware of those. One of my to-do items in this last mile category is to have meetings where these providers tell us what what they're willing to tell us, and sometimes they aren't very forthcoming because they want to keep their competitive edge. So what ends up happening is many communities have to just come up with a different solution than relying on the 2 main providers. So I probably have already covered most of this, but I wanted to make sure that we talk about more specifics about last mile. The first point there is old technologies need to be updated, meaning the technologies that the two providers have in place were good in the beginning, but they aren't meeting today's problems and certainly won't meet tomorrow's broadband needs. The two current major internet providers to homes and businesses offer basic services, and these services are over older technologies and don't get fiber as the last leg to the home or business. There are some exceptions. Larger businesses can pay the company to install fiber all the way to their home, but the cost is not what a consumer would want to pay. So this limitation constrains what speeds can be offered. So it's all related. Older technology means you can't have higher speeds, and they also do not offer the symmetrical. So all the services available are non-symmetrical, which is what I was talking about earlier. And that's where the uploads and download speeds are not the same, and slow up speeds cause problems when doing things like today. Especially if more than one person is using the service in your house, is using the service at the same time. And this is, everybody acknowledges this problem, and that solutions such as fiber to the home are designed to address this type of problem. It's just a matter of how soon that can be done and if we can afford the cost of it. Fiber to the home solutions are also known to be a good investment long-term. So solving the problems of middle mile, partnering with others in the region, meaning not just Los Alamos, but others in our region, is the best way to work together and get a second fiber line off the hill, and then everybody would benefit from that. Even the tribes in Espanol and others can benefit. Part of the reason that is true is because we're already working with the organization ReadyNet, who has a network around the community. And then solving the problem of last mile, building out fiber around the community is definitely the first step. Expanding where the county has fiber, and that doesn't necessarily mean all the way to the home in the first step, but building a fiber ring or having a fiber master plan is where we find ourselves. Some fiber already exists. ReadyNet, as I mentioned, owns some fiber. Los Alamos Public Schools is already using some, and the IT of the county, Los Alamos County, has a heavy investment in connecting a lot of their buildings with fiber. So we aren't starting from scratch. We just need to expand that, and then as we're able to begin to do fiber to the home. So we need to work on both fronts, the middle mile and the last mile, simultaneously, because as we turn up more and more service and citizens need more connections to their home, that feed going off the hill needs to grow and be more robust, and also have the redundancy built into it. A goal is to create a robust and future-proof community broadband network. That's the term that we're using, that was used in the past, and so CBN is something that you'll hear us talking about. And this, these type community broadband networks have definitely already been done lots of times around the nation. There's been lots of scenarios where the local providers, it didn't make economic sense for them to do the investment, and so the communities themselves had to come together and come up with solutions. Luckily, there's funding available that hasn't been available in the past, and one of my jobs is to make sure we are maximizing that. So how do we fund it? A little bit of an overview is some acronyms here. If you pay attention to what the legislation has happened at the federal level, there have been billions and actually trillions approved to do infrastructure, and not just broadband infrastructure, but infrastructure of all types: roads, electric, water, broadband, and more. And the IIJA, or Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, was what set aside 1.2 trillion to make things better, to fix bridges, and also address broadband. For broadband, the end amount that's going to go towards building fiber or other solutions around the nation is 42.5 billion. I mentioned that earlier. And I need to update my bullet there because New Mexico is actually going to get 650 million. I learned that yesterday, that the estimated amount is significant. And the meeting that I had, or that I was listening to, they updated that amount to indicate that it'll be over 600 million, and that's great news. Because there's a lot of work that needs to be done across the state. The way those dollars will get to Los Alamos, if we qualify, is through the state office, and that was the meeting that I was in. The state office is ramping up right now to create a program in how to distribute the funds. The reality is, though, that there will be qualifications on the funds, and it's going to be hard for Los Alamos County to qualify for based on the fact that we have some better internet connections than some of the most rural locations in the state. So that we need to strike a balance there, but we have work to do here in our community as well. There are other broadband funding, federal funding that is happening, and from the USDA, NTIA, which is under Commerce, and then there's some through the Treasury Capital Fund, and then of course the FCC has different pools of money. So lots of money, unprecedented amounts, never seen this before, and it's finally coming to a head where the public is interested, and the legislators are seeing that and have taken action to try to improve broadband for the entire nation where it's lacking. So I talked about the state trying to get organized and create a program. The governor did set up an office of experienced infrastructure advisors for managing New Mexico's portion of the 1.2 trillion infrastructure funds, as they pertain, like experts in roads and experts in water. You may have heard that talked about. But it'll be, and it obviously will be critical for New Mexico to take full advantage of that. So it's a good thing that the governor has found some experts, and one of the experts is in broadband. There's an advisor / director for broadband, and his name is Matt Schmidt, and he is reporting to the governor, which is, the buck stops with the governor, so we should be able to see some action, I hope. And based on the meeting I saw yesterday, I am encouraged that the act is coming together. So state dollars are also coming alongside to match some of the federal dollars. And this 70 million I found out yesterday is actually, there's more like 123 million coming available. And there's actually going to be a pilot program starting really soon that I am encouraged, and I hope that we'll be able to get our request in for that. But a combination of funding is definitely going to be required, federal, state, and local portions, because even with this pilot program, there's like a 25% local match that would need to happen. So I put a slide in here to kind of back up some of the funding that has happened. This slide is from a presentation that Department of IT did. I wanted you to see it. It's from 2021 legislative session. House Bill 10 created the Connect New Mexico Act, and that's actually the council that's gathering and meeting and getting organized, and they're the ones that'll be awarding all the funds that I mentioned on the previous slides. And a partner bill was a Senate Bill 93 that created the Office of Broadband Access and Expansion, and that's where Matt Schmidt, I mentioned, was the advisor. He's under that that office, and it is appointed by the governor and reports to the governor in coordination with the Connect New Mexico Council. And a slide here from Department of IT's presentation is showing who makes up that Connect New Mexico Council that'll be evaluating applications and awarding. There's no names on this slide, but there is a link on this slide that takes you to a web page that lists out all the folks that are the names behind these positions. But there is state agencies represented, public is represented, as well as tribal. And the state funding, last year, the state legislators approved allocating some state funds to go alongside the federal funds that they knew were coming. And you see, and highlighted in yellow, there is 70 million. That's where I was getting the funds. That's where I was getting my 70 million from. But in the meeting yesterday, I found out there are other pools of money that add up. There was a allocation in a special session of the legislature that happened in December, where they took the ARPA funds, which are coming from the federal government down to the state, and the state can allocate how they're used. They have allocated the 123 million to be used for broadband. So that's a really big deal, and that's the pilot program that's just kicking off. A lot of words on this slide. I'll just keep talking, and we'll wrap up here in a minute. Kudos to the local representative, Chandler. She was one of the ladies of 8, is what they were called. It was a group of 8 ladies that decided broadband needed some attention, and so they spent a year working and meeting. And then in the legislative session last year, they accomplished quite a few broadband bills, along with some others that partnered with them. But it did set up the new Office of Broadband and Expansion and created the Connect New Mexico Council. This year, in the legislative session that concluded recently, there were more broadband bills. There was a specific legislation of note to point out to you guys today, HJR 1. And I think that it's called Essential Household Services. And again, Representative Chandler co-sponsored that bill, but it is to amend a law called the Anti-Donation Clause. It's part of the Constitution, I believe, state constitution, that prohibits money from the state going to help, going to private entities. And what the law did was, that got approved, was to propose to the voters to add an exception as an amendment to the Constitution, to add an exception for essential household services. Internet is one of those. So this is an important thing that needs to move forward, because what a lot of times the state is wanting to partner with private entities, and they have some federal money, and they want to add some state money to that to make things happen where things, economics aren't making investments happen. But we've been prohibited from doing that by this anti-donation clause. So it isn't a repeal of the anti-donation clause. It is an exception, and there are some guidelines or guardrails, so to speak, of how that can move forward. It isn't just a blank check. So what's upcoming about this is that it will be on the ballot this fall. And perhaps this is where some of you guys can come in and advocate for that, or consider advocating and educating the public on this important ballot item that will be coming up this fall. So the world, what I'm able to do may change a year from now or after this passes, because then we'll be able to partner more with private entities to do things that make sense instead of being handcuffed by an out-of-date law. There's a real interesting history on that law. It had to do with railroads coming out west, and it's an interesting history, and there is some purpose to the law, but these exceptions to it will make common sense projects happen. So as far as local work related to last mile, my work is really ramping up. Just this Tuesday at the council meeting, we presented a proposal for council approval, and it did get approved to work with a broadband consulting company to update our 10-year-old plan. And that plan was really pretty good. So, and it still has value. So we were recycling that and getting the consulting company to update that. And then along with some other tasks and a 9-month timeline, we have 6 tasks and deliverables. You will see surveys coming out, and you know, the structure of that is yet to be determined. But the final task will be to assist with an RFP to move forward with last mile work. And the goal is for us to be shovel ready, or some people call it application ready, to be primed for funding requests when the new New Mexico Council program is ready to award federal funds and state funds. Relating to the middle mile, the local work that's happening is we're having conversations with many stakeholders, and there seems to be high interest among many of us to get a second internet feed coming off the hill. Santa Fe County is interested, the Pueblo of San Ildefonso, Lanel, of course, and PNM may be a potential partner that can make some of these really difficult obstacle things happen. And I do want to point out that I have had a great conversation with LANet. I think I saw Alan's name, Alan Sain's name on connected here today. He and I had a great conversation maybe a month ago, and I expect you know, that they will definitely have a role to play in the middle mile and or last mile efforts. So kudos to them. I hear nothing but great things about them, and they are sort of an exception to the national providers that I was talking about earlier that aren't interested in local community investment. So that wraps up my comments, and I had to get my little thing in here. It is St. Patty's Day, so happy St. Patty's Day. See the green. If I have to yell for my alma mater, Baylor, playing today. They might be even playing right now. And if you're into basketball and sports, there you go. So that's my Sikkim Bears. And thanks for listening. And I hope you got something out of it. And maybe, Carol-Ann, we have some questions.
We do.
Excellent.
We do have some questions. So I'm going to go through the ones on the chat first. And then I have some from someone who was unable to attend today. Happy St. Patrick's. Oh, we're all back. Okay. All these things moving. Actually, this is from Akana.
Yeah, I
so
just stopped in my share so we could see the screens.
That's fine. So regarding the one internet feed that's off the hill, she had heard rumors last year that Lanel was bringing in a second feed for redundancy, and that they were willing to let the town use some of that. Is that not true?
So I have had conversations with Lanel, and there have been ongoing conversations with Lanel. Lanel's been working on this for years because they feel exposed and they have a great case. They make a great case for needing a second internet feed. So absolutely, they are working on that. I would say working on it is not a rumor. There's nothing in the books yet. So there's, they have high interest, and definitely there's openness to partnering with us. When you do a fiber install, there's lots of strands and fiber strands, and if you install a big enough bundle of fiber cables, you can definitely allow others on those other independent fiber strands that go through. So that's definitely it would not make sense to do anything else.
Okay. Next, well, sort of two questions here, so I will read both of them to you. Does LANL have segregated bandwidth, and does LANL have priority over bandwidth?
Yeah, I didn't go into this topic, but there's a term called dark fiber, and then there's the opposite of that, which is called lit fiber. And that's what I was talking about earlier when I say the big bundle has lots of strands in it, is that let's say there's 100 strands inside of this one bundle that gets installed. LANL would say, I want to use 25 of those, but the other 75, let's figure out a good community public use of those. And so those would be operating independently. They're, since it's dark fiber, when they light up their part of it, no one else that's inside of that strand sees the traffic that is happening over the other strands of fiber. That might have been a little complicated explanation, but hopefully that helped.
Okay, next one. Resilience and security. FCC and DHS have requirements, for example, supply chain requirements. Are you tracking those?
So the FCC has some rules that, like I know with the school projects that I worked on, they added a rule that says you couldn't do work with a certain manufacturer that was out of China, and I think that's a certain manufacturer, but that has to be balanced with the supply chain that's having problems right now. So I have seen some discussions of people raising their hands saying, hey, let's don't just shut it down and just do American built, because that just exacerbates the supply chain issue. So it's a difficult topic, but definitely need to be aware and following best guidance with the cybersecurity risk that others have identified.
Okay, so can we leverage LANL needs to get more or better infrastructure sooner?
Yeah, yes, and just a general comment. LANL seems very willing to talk, and one concept that they shared with me is that they have the ability to pay for monthly service, and they have less ability to pay for like a front end build. So you may have to coordinate and find funding to build it out, and then allow LANL to pay for their fair share for a large amount of bandwidth, and that would help fund the operations of the rest of the network.
Okay, I have one more here, just giving everyone a head up, and then I have some from that were sent to me. So, do you know what sorts of speeds Los Alamos residents are seeing now? And how would we find that out? And is that a requirement when applying for grants? And I can repeat them if you need to be.
No, that's a great question. And it is required for most grants. You have to document the fact that you have need, and there's a certain threshold of speed that gets you a better score on an application. If your speeds are low, then you get scored higher in the application, and the higher score means you're more likely to get funded. That's the typical logic for applications. What was the first part of the question? I'm not sure I answered it.
Sure. Well, do you know what sorts of speeds Los Alamos residents are seeing now?
Right.
And how would we find that out?
So the 10-year-old study that we're updating had some information on that, and that's one thing that's probably changed over that 10 years. The procurement that the council approved will, as I mentioned, surveys. The survey and the company that we're working with does offer a speed test portion of that survey that will be gathering that information to help make that case.
Okay, did we answer all of that? I think so. Okay, so does anyone who's on this Zoom right now have a question?
I see 2 hands up.
Okay, well, I don't see hands up, so how come I don't see those? Oh, I see. I'm sorry, David. I see yours and James. Got it. Sorry. So David, do you want to go ahead? And then James.
Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
great. Well, Jerry, thank you that was a great presentation. I'm a county councilor, so maybe we'll get to see that sometime in the county, but that was really good, and to see all the different issues laid out. And as I understand it, doesn't CenturyLink own our fiber optic link, and that Lanel and everybody else rents space on that cable? So how would your new cable work? Would that be something that we own, or does the state own it, or how does the state funding work? Are they putting in lines that they own and become a public use thing like a highway? Or is it, what's the financial business structure? Or does somebody else always own it and then you have to pay tolls all the time? How does that work? Is it like a tollway, or is it like a free public thing that everybody uses, like a state road? Go ahead. Thank you. And I have another question too, but.
Okay, yeah, let's tackle that one. And if I need more prompting, let me know. That's a great question, David. So the last mile is sort of an answer, and then the middle mile is a different answer. So the middle mile part where you're talking about CenturyLink owning the link off the hill, that's absolutely true. They've tried to rename themselves. We keep calling them CenturyLink. Lumen is the new name. But they are the ones that also own the copper plant. That's that DSL. You can get DSL internet, I believe. But the link off the hill is the most critical part. And yes, every provider that's providing internet here, including LANet, has to go through CenturyLink and buy like wholesale for them. So that ends up being the problem with competition, and then resiliency and redundancy. Even if you bought
true. Yeah,
even if you bought
true.
internet from 2 people, they're both going over that same fiber.
Yeah.
And things do happen, and they will happen as far as fiber cuts, and we'll survive it, but it'll have major implications. So the strategy is to get a second redundant path, and also to provide competition, so that CenturyLink knows there's another game in town. So the ownership of that new second link could be CenturyLink. I mean, Lumen, they're trying, I think, to work on a second link to have redundancy for themselves. But independent of that, the county is working with those stakeholders, regional stakeholders, having meetings and talking about what are our options. And there are some really doable options. You just have to really be determined to get to them. And the funding looks like it's, that we can at least apply for funding to try to get some state help or federal help with funding at least a part of that, and other stakeholders would be interested enough to where they want to pitch in. Ownership could, with the middle mile, ownership would probably not be the county owning that. ReadyNet is the local organization that is, their charter is to do things like this. And they have done things like this across the Espanola Valley. They just weren't able to get a fiber link up the hill. There were some problems over the last 10 years. And now we're just trying to work around those problems. ReadyNet is a likely candidate for being the operator of the network, the middle mile portion. The last mile portion, that's yet to be determined, and the company that we hired is going to make their recommendations at the end of the 9-month data gathering to see, what the recommendation is. Then we would go out and do an RFP, and depending on, how the RFP is structured and depending on the responses we get, you may end up with a private-owned network here in town or a county-owned network. And then with the county-owned network, you would have two options to whether the county would operate it and provide the internet, or whether you would open it up to any provider that comes along, or you end up like having a group of providers that you have preferred partnerships with. How did I do?
Well, that's great. That's a great answer. And so for this new cable line, are we going to try to partner with other areas like maybe the reservations that are underserved, and then try to use that to be a sort of go in with a group for the state funding? Is that the kind of idea? We partner with Lanol, partner with maybe San Ildefonso or somebody, and then we go in as a group to get service for everyone.
Yes, Santa Fe County has been in conversation with us most recently. But we also have had recent conversations with San Ildefonso Pueblo. They are, they're motivated. They have an application on their own to get last mile around their pueblo, but they need connectivity in and out, and they're reaching out to us to see how we want to partner together. And ReadyNet organization is actually made up. The entities that make up that are the pueblos and the Española community, as well as Rio Arriba and Santa Fe County. So when we say ReadyNet, we're really talking about the regional entities.
Yeah. And I just want to interrupt for just 1 second. So hold on, which is that it is a little bit after 1, and people are, of course, free to continue if you're able to stay a little bit longer, Jerry. But you can sign off and not feel bad. I have some questions too that at least we want to get it on the video. So Jerry, are you time constrained? Are you okay for 15 more minutes or whatever?
Yeah, 15 is probably good. I do have a meeting at 1:30.
Okay, so that's what we just said, and I'm going to. So James, did you lower your? Are you next? And David, did you finish?
Well, I'm not really done, but I'll let other people talk. I don't want to monopolize it. I have more questions.
Let James,
but I can call Jerry.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah,
James, are you there?
doing
Okay.
the presentation.
You need.
I guess real quick, the main question I wanted.
Pardon me, James. I can hardly hear you, and I don't know if other people can, but is everyone else able to?
Let me see if I can fix this. Sorry.
It's a little soft, but I think I can hear him.
Yeah, but there's some of us older people who want to hear.
Is that?
Yeah, that's why I have these.
Is that any better?
It's still soft, but I can hear you.
Yeah, we'll just
I'll repeat
harder.
I can repeat the question if need be.
All right.
That's good.
Sorry about that. I'll try and fix that for next time. The big question was about the consultant that you've hired for the county, this like $300K contract. I was wondering if Los Alamos Network was involved in that at all. I apologize. I don't run an ISP. I don't run a broadband consulting firm, so I don't know all the details there, but I feel like just kind of as a citizen of Los Alamos that if I was going to ask a question about Los Alamos internet, LAnet would be the first people I would talk to because they've been doing it for, I don't know, maybe 10 years in town. I mean, Alan can speak more about it, but they have dealt with all the challenges with the geography, with getting from the I-25 backbone through the Pueblos, all those kind of challenges that we're going to have. So yeah, I guess that was my big question is were they involved at all in the bid for the consultant contract?
So I mean, absolutely, it's a resource that we have, and I hope that I can continue to call on Alan and involve him in the process as much as appropriate, and definitely want to take advantage of Alan and others that have local community knowledge that is valuable. So to your point, it's a resource we definitely want to take advantage of. I think that so to answer your question, outright no, LANet was not given an opportunity. We used a group of vendors that went through a procurement at the state level that did through the General Services Department of the state of New Mexico. They do state pricing agreements where they put it out to bid and bidders bid. So the procurement side of things, the legal side is handled that way. So when you have a larger procurement, you're covered as far as due diligence and meeting the law of that. So that is one of the reasons we went with this vendor, is because they had the lowest pricing on the state pricing agreement. And they also are very familiar with New Mexico. They have done a lot of work that I've been involved with and seen them do at the state level, but also they are the go-to vendor that Department of IT has awarded for helping counties such as ourselves do consulting. Like, these guys are experts at writing, knowing what tasks need to be done, how to do surveys, and how to help do an RFP. So while they aren't, local citizens, they are very familiar with a lot of activity in the state of New Mexico. Does that
Yeah, that's great. Thanks
answer
for
it, Jane?
explaining it to me.
So, so your hand is still, and now it's gone. Your hand is still up, James. Are you kind of okay with the answer?
Yeah, I'm done. Sorry about that.
Okay, great. I'm not a really techie here. You're just having to hang in here with me. So does anyone else have a question and I haven't seen it? No? If so, speak up. Okay, so I have these questions and they're from Andy Frazier, who has been really pushing the broadband, and Jerry knows about him from his blog. And he has this excuse today. He couldn't come because he's playing the part of a senator in the Oppenheimer film. I mean, really, what kind of excuse is that? Anyway, so he has some questions. And his most important one was, what kind of input / engagement from Los Alamos citizens do you want, and how do they provide it?
Luckily, that's a great question. And one thing that we've considered doing, I haven't made any moves forward on that, is create an advisory committee, and a lot of the people that have spoke up would be great participants on that. I expect that with the consultant that we've hired, that'll be, actually there are stakeholder meetings planned as a part of their task, and the survey that will be done in the speed test process that they are going to offer for us, we'll be gathering that kind of data. So I think that's the answer, is that this consultant will help us through this 9-month process, and at the end of the process there should be a good understanding of input from the community.
So, okay, so he'll listen. He's going to listen to this video later. So
okay,
I'm just charged with asking questions here. So the next one is, you may have actually answered it. Is it true that there's a narrow time window through which the county can get support from the feds and or the state to support county provision of broadband? And if so, should we jump on it rather than studying the issue?
So one of my modes of operation is urgency, but things don't move as fast as I want them to. I was told that it would be a year before the federal funding that I referred to, which is the 42 billion, and that the state gets 650 million out of that. It may take a year for them to make up the federal rules that says, here's the rules for applying, and here's who qualifies, and then making that award to the state. But the state is busy right now with this Connect New Mexico Council meeting and forming their program, so they're not waiting on that. and what caught me a little off guard yesterday was that in the Connect New Mexico Council meeting was that they've announced a pilot program that I was referring to kind of get practiced up for the federal funding. There is a pot of state funding that they're making available that I mentioned was allocated. It actually is federal money, but it was allocated by the state to be used for broadband. That's the 123 million. And so that'll be a significant effort, and that could happen as early as April. So we're going to be all over that and doing our best to apply for that. The company that we hired, I haven't met with them yet. They don't know about this pilot program because they were acting under the timeline of 9 months, and that would have been perfect for then ramping up and being ready with that shovel-ready, the results of the RFP. So we may have to talk about how to react to with this consultant. CTC is the name of the company, and we may have to talk to them about revising the timeline. So good question.
Okay, I have several more.
Okay.
He sent me a whole thing here and I printed
Okay.
it off. So
I'll try to give shorter answers to wrap up.
Whatever. Otherwise he can call you too. The premise of this question is that broadband is a natural monopoly and a utility, and as such should either be regulated or provided by the county like all the other utilities. So given that, do you have an estimate or any idea how much more residents and businesses in the county pay for broadband than they would pay if it were treated like other utilities?
That's a pretty complicated question. So I don't really know the answer. I don't really know the answer to that. I do know that all those topics have been discussed and considered in the past. And sometimes they make sense, sometimes they don't. I mean, there's definitely some logic to the approaches mentioned. It's just, you need to find out whether the public has the appetite to make some of that happen. There would be an upfront investment no matter what. Even if it was provided free, there would be a large upfront investment, and that's what the community would have to be on board for that.
And this one kind of refers back to that one on the same premise. Do you have a measure of the difference between the quality of service provided by the local ISPs and the quality of service provided by the county DPU? I'm not sure you can answer that one.
Right. He's saying if there was services run by the county, exactly, how would it compare quality wise? Like what would the experience be? I can say that no matter who runs the service, if it's running over newer infrastructure, it's going to be better than running over older infrastructure that is sort of band-aided to make work. So I think that's a good enough answer.
That's fine. And he can contact you too.
Right. Yep.
So
I look forward to meeting him at some point.
He's a great guy. He's a great guy. Right. So this last question has a number of them. And so I'm going to read it through and then you can kind of, however, what are the different ways that folks in the county access the internet? How much is it costing them? What is available to newcomers or dissatisfied current customers? And would it be appropriate for your office to track such information and make it available to us to enable comparison shopping? So it's kind of a very broad question there.
It's basically documenting problems and making that publicly available. Yeah. Well, it will be available, the surveys that are done, to see, what people's thoughts are. That isn't necessarily specific problems, but when I have these meetings, everyone is always talking about, well, I've got to do X because, my internet's not working, having all these different Zoom meetings. So those are more anecdotal, and you want to try to turn those into some sort of data that you can use. And that's a great idea. Like if there were a public access network, you would want to like have those documented and posted so that you'd see the trouble tickets that people called in with, and what the solution was. And the reviews online, the system, where you do a Google review or a product review, might be something that we incorporate in the future. But that's a great point, but I don't really have any specific solution anticipated.
And I can actually send you these questions because they're on my email. I
Okay,
can just send them to you,
sounds
to
good.
Jerry. So does anyone else have a question before I just thank Jerry for
Do
coming?
we want to
and
go
giving
back
up
to
his
David?
time? David, are you still? I don't.
I'm
yeah, there
certainly
are. David?
listening, but no, I think this has been a great thing, and I'll call Jerry with other questions. It's a very great presentation, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for putting this on. My chance to hear from him. Thank you very
Well, we
much.
thought it would be a good one.
Yes, it's a great presentation. Thank you.
So does anyone else who I'm not seeing with a hand raised, or I didn't see it in, oh, James has a parent teacher conference to attend, but anyway, he said, thank you. I think I got everything that was in the chat and the questions that Andy asked. So if no one has anything else, we'll let Jerry go to his next meeting. And I thank you so much, Jerry, for coming and answering my questions and doing that.
This has been great, great interaction. And, whether it's this group or another group, I look forward to further interactions and your support, but also your ideas and critiques of plans and input. We look forward to getting that as we move forward.